Hello, and welcome to the Dungeon Jukebox. This is number three. Right. I promised myself I wouldn't say so much. So I'm going to try not to. I am a natural as it turns out. I think my mum always pointed that out, even as a small boy. Can I have a biscuit? Can I go to the park? Can I have a Kuwahara laser light? And if you don't know what that is, you need to watch E.T., because that's where I fell in love with BMXs as a child. Anyway, so I've got a few things. I've actually made some notes. And if you know me, you would know that's quite extraordinary. The only time I ever make notes is if A, I'm in a meeting, and then probably I'll ignore 90% of those, and most of them are doodles. I will make notes, obviously, before and prepping an adventure. And hell, sometimes I ignore 90% of those notes too. They seem like a good idea at the time, but much like this, we'll see how far I get with them. But I had to think about a few things that I think are probably relevant to most people who, on both sides of the table, the GM and the player. Look, there's the ums again. Be succinct. So it's interchangeable, isn't it? Burnout. There are times that, well, I put it in this perspective. Your players want to play. They don't always want to play at the same time. Time goes by, and then you'll get that kind of, are we playing soon? Oh, I'm free this weekend. Are we, So it is nice to be in the position where you're, okay, I'm going to put together a game, put together the beginning of a campaign maybe, or, if you're in the midst of a campaign, to put the next part together and go back over what happened previously. Because I'm not very organized, quite often that means texting my brother or one of the other players and saying, can you remind me what happened to that NPC? Did they die? I'm not editing these ums out, right? They exist. I'm going to use this as a record to see if I get any better. And if you want to play a drinking game, I mean, it'd be the saddest drinking game ever, but if you did, you could maybe take a drink every time I say So I heard, oh my gosh, I can't remember his name, but I heard the lovely man with the lovely voice who does the Grognard Files. And if you don't listen to a podcast called the Grognard Files, really do. Yeah, I mean, it is just, it's very, very good, entertaining and full of knowledge. But one of the things that he refers to is something called DM or GMitis, where you suddenly feel, it's quite a flat feeling actually. It's a feeling of, I want to play, but I don't want to spend ages creating, the next part. And then I suppose it's a little bit like a performance thing where it happens to you, it comes sideways every now and again. I used to play in bands when I was younger, and even sometimes you step out or you look at a venue and you knew that was going to be filled with, 500 plus more people or whatever. And everything about the situation is, this is great. This is what I want to do. This is where I spent hours rehearsing, practicing, learning so I can be in this very, very place. And then when it comes to the 11th hour, you'd rather be anywhere else. And I think it's just like, it's a human condition where you just suddenly feel like a fatigue. I don't want to entertain people. Just don't. I can spend a whole week being quite excited about a game. And then literally on the Saturday morning or the Sunday, I'm not up for it at all. And I sometimes have to force myself to be the entertaining, GM with NPCs that are alive, so I'm not just dully describing, yeah, there's a arched door over there. Do what you want. It's not very motivating for anybody. It's a thing, and it comes in phases. Like this. Like this is at the moment I am definitely, I don't say enjoying, seems a bit strong, but it's nice to talk on my channel about these things because they're things that sit on my mind and they're not important in the scheme of things. These are not important things. If fundamentally, if I said to someone, say out there on the mats, jiu-jitsu mats, and said, "Oh, I don't feel like playing D&D this weekend," and again, if you know me, I just call everything D&D because it's just easier. It's a bit like when I say to people I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu and they make this like, yeah, and I'm like, yeah, fine. That's what we do. Yeah, we hit each other. So it's not important in the scheme of things, but underlying is something that's quite important. And I guess it's for everybody, wherever they are in life, is that sometimes you just feel you're not ready. You don't want to put yourself out there. You'd rather, snuggle up on the sofa and watch your favorite TV show, or I don't know, in my case, spend a couple of hours in Diablo 4 because the new expansion's out and it's good. So, burnout. I'm going to call this episode. Not like it's going to happen, is it? It's not like a story arc to this. I'm going to call this, title this, Burned Out in the Dungeon. I quite like it as a title. I think I'll stick with it. It comes around. So last time I was talking about a role-playing game that I'm really enjoying called Easy D6, which is a nice, not an antidote, but it's a nice palate cleanser, refresher. As it says on the box, is easy. So what happened? We were playing a game on Saturday. I got to, let's say midday, and I'd been training in the morning. I taught a class, coaching the kids, teenagers, and I felt afterwards really flat. And then I thought, whoa, in 2 hours, I need to finish prepping, print some notes out, get to my brother's house where we were playing, sit down, start playing. And I really was not in the mood. And I thought, okay, Easy D6 is one of those games where you can kind of wing it a bit. You can wing all these games, but particularly something like Easy D6. And quite often, and this is my little, for anyone out there who suffers from DMitis or, being burned out in the dungeon, go into the game and very quickly find yourself a conversational NPC. This is my solution to these things. If you go straight into something where it's a grind, like a battle, or there's a lot of you having to, read the notes, read the intro, get the exposition down, this guy's motivation is this, and so the hard work. The easy work is find an NPC, give them a reason to go and talk to the adventuring party or whatever, and then just turn the opening of the game into a conversation. It's amazing, actually, how that changes the pattern into something that is engaging, fun. Your players get involved in that conversation, and in the back of that, you can be almost like pulling yourself up, ready for the bit of the game where actually, we're going to go. All the players have decided they want to go on this quest. They want to do the thing. They want to, so you can spend a time almost assimilating yourself back into the mode of being the dungeon master again. Sometimes just saying to your players, I've never felt it useful to say to your players at the beginning of the game, like, I'm really tired or something. I think it's like lots of things where if you present, even though they're your friends and sometimes family, I think there's like a thing of like, well, if you're tired, then it's going to be one of those games, one of the ones where everyone's just like a bit off and a bit quiet and checking their phones and stuff. So I don't think you do that. I think you can just start a game, introduce the NPC. That NPC can act as more exposition. You can discuss other things that are happening in the realm or in the city, or other clues that you can throw in, even if they just are, what's the word? Improvised. And I'm not going to say any good GM, because that's a little bit, but any GM probably has come to this thing before where one of their players says something and then you kind of take it like it's, oh yeah, that was always part of the game. My friend and fellow games master, Di, he is very good at this. But because I'm a DM as well, I spot it a lot, where one of the players will say something, they'll come to a conclusion, they will jump to a conclusion or, an assumption, and they say, oh, right, the ring we found, well, that must have something to do with the thing, and then there's the mirror, right? Remember the thing with the mirror? And I can see Di watching and listening, and because they're coming up with a better plot and a better idea that you wrote down, or even better, an idea you never had, all of a sudden it's kind of, yeah, and then make a little note behind your DM screen, and then later on present that as something that was always part of the adventure, so that then the player, it's nice because then the players are like, oh shit, we were right about that. But when I quiz Di on it, and later on I'm like, dude, that wasn't in the adventure, and he's like, oh, look at me, it was. I do it as well. I do it all the time. Someone will come up with something, and I'll be like, that's really good, actually. All these little things help with the burnout. I think you just have to, it's almost like jumping in a swimming pool. If it's cold, you got to do it. You've planned it. And unless you're ill or like just so broken that you can't play, I think you just turn up, use the conversational NPC, pick the things that come out of that conversation, make it light. They shouldn't be all sort of doom and gloom. Make it light so that the conversation flows easily, and then pick bits. And then when you're ready, even if it's like have a cup of coffee while you're having this conversation with the NPC outside the circus tent or outside the pub or whatever. I have to admit that when I played on Saturday and I played Easy D6, I knew what the arc of the thing was. I'll tell you. Big city, there's a circus in town, and which always creates a little bit of tension because, circuses, creepy and weird. I gave all the, you see people on stilts handing out flyers. They want you to go to the circus. There's kind of like odd people around. Some of them are definitely ne'er-do-wells, whatever, which, all good. And then on the same day, and slightly awkwardly, the lord of the city was coming back from his campaigns, and he had all this treasure that he wanted to show. He wanted to show his citizens to show them how great and powerful he was, as kind of, I suppose, what's the word? There's a word for it, isn't there? When I guess it's to kind of convince the populace that when he goes to go and fight the next guy in the next city across, or in the bordering realm, that actually, we are great and powerful. And anyway, that was kind of my thing. And then it would be quite simply, one of those items that was brought back from his campaigns was actually a very powerful, ancient and nasty relic that would do a bad thing if someone got hold of it, took it into the sewers under the city, formed a ritual, and then if that ritual was completed, then it would literally rot the city from underneath over a period of time and create a whole new kind of environment for my players to know that they had a hand in this because they didn't stop it, or they would stop the ritual, beat the bad guy, all good. Very easy story. But I was in one of those moods, as I've already described, so I turn up at the table and then I'm like, right, okay, you're outside a tavern, you're in like a kind of plaza, piazza thing, this is going on, the circus is over there, guards are coming in and they're starting to create this staging where they're going to put all these treasures and stuff, and so it created this kind of mix. And then I thought, I was really kind of, I don't want to get into the meat of the adventure yet. I'm kind of not ready for it. So I introduced a barbarian with pert buttocks, who wanted one of the chairs that that the party was sitting on, and that created kind of a bit of an altercation because they didn't want him to sit down. I introduced a number of my go-to is always a barmaid or somebody who serves in the tavern. I don't know why, but I have to default to a West Country accent because that's just the best I can do when it comes to peasants. No offense to the West Country, by the way. I love the West Country. But yeah, my friend Rupert will understand that should he ever listen or hear or watch this. So I kept introducing characters, but each of them had something to say about the day and what was happening. So the NPCs the PCs could ask them questions, the players could ask them questions, and I would have, answers for them. And then eventually I introduced this kind of Andrew Eldritch goth character who was like, rather than aviator sunglasses, I gave him black eye tattoos and stuff. But I introduced him as part of the circus. And then turns out, no surprises, he's the one who's going to steal the artifact. He's the one who's going to try and do the ritual. But I kind of have him, I suppose, befriend and also implicate the players. Now, none of that was in my notes. The character was, the NPC was in my notes, but how he introduced himself, that all just happened organically because it was just all part of this wider conversation and we were laughing. So when this character turns up, I don't think the players had any inkling that he was going to be ultimately the bad guy. So when it came to the final battle, spoilers, they defeated him. It was actually quite funny because he'd already had this rapport with them. They kind of made friends in a way that he was. One thing I love, I still remember it, and it's probably nearly a decade ago. Do you remember, if you listen to the Adventure Zone, and if you don't, please do, from the very beginning, all the way back, and then listen to the whole balance arc with Griffin McElroy and those wonderful guys who have kept me entertained for years. But there's they do The Lost Mines of Phandelver. It was around that time when that adventure came out, 5th edition. I think it was 5th. Yeah, must be. And you could tell that Griffin McElroy is getting quite bored with the structure and the sort of narrow margins of Dungeons and Dragons in a written module. I don't think he ever used a module after that, ever. I don't like modules either, particularly. Too restrictive. So he's obviously come. I remember this character, the glass, I think it's called the spider or the glass spider or the black spider or something. Anyway, Griffin obviously looked at that name and thought, nah. And he called him Magic Brian instead. And there's this whole thing of when the players are fighting and defeating Magic Brian, Griffin's giving them this kind of, this accent where it's like, the players are kicking the crap out of him. And he's like, oh, I shall show you a magic missile. And then they finally beat him up and throw him down a hole. And he's like, I'm dying. I'm going now. So I guess it was a similar situation in my adventure where when you've kind of, I don't know, I'm rambling, but I guess what I'm saying is that if you're suffering from burnout with being the guy at the table who's having to come up with this stuff all the time, without upsetting your players, there is a way to kind of navigate your way through and kind of keep it on a roll. That being said, there may always be times when both you and your players are burnt out, and that happens too. Players get burnt out sometimes too. They've had a rough week. They're coming out of a sense of duty, but you can always tell. That they're not really with you. But the same thing, if you have that, then it's okay to sort of stop a game and say, do you want to play a board game, play cards, whatever? Do that instead, or just talk. That can happen too. Especially as you get older, actually, you get a bunch of guys in a room and girls. And sometimes it's like, you realise that actually you're there because you're just like, it's a social thing. And that if you're not really, your mind's not on the adventure, you can just talk. It's good. It's all good. And then next time you're kind of like, okay, when we come into the room fresh, you're ready to go. Anyway, that's enough about that. But for all the GMs out there who suffer from this, and I guess we all do over time, because we kind of care that we want to make sure that we're entertaining the people that are coming and playing the game with us. Listen to the Grognard Files. It's a podcast think it's everywhere you'd expect podcasts to be. And it's the first time I've heard it called GMitis, but as soon as I heard the phrase, I was like, yeah, I know what that means. I know that. So, okay. I got a little note here that says the GM role, a job nobody applied for. I think there are people who they really want to be the dungeon master. Like, I played a few games online. I don't like playing games online. I only really started because of the pandemic or whatever. And it's a good way of keeping in touch with people. And it was fun, right? It was fun, but I don't like it. If I get choice of playing with people or playing online, I'll always pick people. There seems to be a whole swathe of people at some point who, I call it maybe like the Matt Mercer effect. They've watched Critical Role hours and hours and hours of Critical Role, and they're like, I want to be like Matt Mercer. That's the kind of DM I want to be. But Matt Mercer's a special kind of guy. You know, he's an actor. He's a voice actor. He is an exceptional GM, but he's an exceptional GM in an exceptional environment. He's not your average GM at an average table. They're actors. Everything is so beautifully constructed. It is unattainable. You know, it's the 1% of. It's not the norm. And so if you want to try and emulate that, great, because take the good bits of Matt Mercer. You know, if you want to be that DM, by all means, you know, like study the method. I would say privately, I think the best, I'm going to say celebrity, but he's not really a celebrity, but he's awesome, is Chris Perkins, originally working with Wizards of the Coast. I watched, I think from the very beginning with Will Wheaton, I watched the Acquisitions Incorporated. I would work on my laptop, doing my job, and at the same time I'd have that on in the background. I find watching or listening to actual plays quite sort of soothing while I'm working, until I have to really concentrate, and then I have to just listen to music or nothing. But anyway, beside the point. But Chris Perkins is amazing because he has all the skill of being a DM, but didn't have to, like, I suppose it felt more like my table. It felt more like a table that I understood. The same goes, there's a really wicked channel called Mystery Quest. If I remember, I will put links to these things. Mystery Quest is, maybe because it's like English, but that is really like my table. It's quite rude. They laugh a lot. They muck around a lot. They throw the GM curveballs, which he expertly deals with. The same happens with Chris Perkins because he's playing with Mike Krahulik and Will Wheaton, and you know he's got all sorts of characters at his table who are really quite difficult to deal with, but it creates an enormous sense of fun. Matt Mercer effect is, to me, people who take Dungeons and Dragons or the thought of it as a DM very seriously. So when they don't, unfortunately, these are the kind of DMs that become what I would call railroaders. And then it's if you don't do what's on the page, or you don't toe the line, or you don't play the character exactly to the letter as it's written in the damn book, then you kind of get this sense of there's a problem. There's a problem. And I guess if you want to be a DM, you need to practice the art of losing your ego, ditching your pride, and everything is for the fiction. Everything's for the story. As soon as you start, well, that's not what's in my notes, and that's not what I wrote down, and that's not what's in the book, and that's not exactly the rule, then you get stroppy about that. Your players immediately check out, or worse, they may actually start kind of bullying you at the table. You know, they may start deliberately making you feel a bit like a shit DM. It's one to be watched out for. Anyway, that's the job nobody applied for, and if you did apply for it, then it may not make you the best DM. The best DMs, in my opinion, are the ones who are like, either they've got the time on their hands, or they are naturally orators, gregarious people, I suppose, or very well read, just studied. You know, they can pull a reference from a book, from a film, from a TV show, they're very quick to say, it's like the thing in that, and then understand that everyone at the table probably gets that reference. Because that helps to visualize something very quickly and create like a tone very quickly. Whereas if we're just kind of like, well, it says in the book that you're attacked by 4 orcs, and if you defeat these 4 orcs, then another 3 orcs will come around the corner and they will attack you a minute later. And then it's like, okay, that's what it says in the rules. Bit dull, but okay, what it is. Anyway, I'll go into it. We're touching it very briefly. TTRPGs for people with jobs and kids. That's a lot of us, particularly at my age. Again, if you're struggling with the big crunchy boys, like Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu takes a lot of, I love Call of Cthulhu, but it takes a lot of prep. Again, shout out to my dungeon master, Di, who runs Call of Cthulhu incredibly well. We just played on Sunday. I played 2 games this weekend. Lucky me. But I got to play this one, and just extraordinary. He put so much effort into this. I don't suppose you'd mind me saying Di doesn't have kids, so I guess he gets the time and has the wherewithal to put these things together and make them incredible for his player. But for people like me, again, easy D6, some of these smaller OSR games. There's so many out there. Pick one. Into the Odd. Grab a copy. Cairn. Grab a copy. Read it. Cover to cover. Take out the bits print off the game hints or the light rules at the end of the book or wherever it is. Have that printed in front of you. Focus on the fiction. Go. I would suggest you do that. If you're really, really busy, please don't sit down with a 90-page module with inserts and think you're going to be able to do that when you have other responsibilities. You won't have much fun, and your players won't have much fun either. Make it real simple and relatable. So next I would like to, because I'm very excited about it, and I don't know what to expect quite from it, but I feel like if it's anywhere carries the sense of the novels, then I am really looking forward to the Dungeon Crawler Carl RPG. I've backed it, and I really, really hope that it is a dungeon crawler. As in, mechanically, it's a bit like Dungeon Crawl Classics, I suppose. In that I don't need from this game, I guess, lots of intrigue's the wrong word. I don't need it to be anything other than a dungeon grind. I sometimes miss, I do a mix of using terrain and characters, figures and stuff. I tend not to so much these days. It's more theatre of the mind, but every now and again you've got to whip out the old chess and pop down some figures and go, right, you're there, and people can sort of see I can move to there and do that, and fine, all good. If you can't, if it's hard to explain the thing, do yourself a favour, get some dry white pens and just do it. But I do miss, certainly from when I was a kid, just a good old crawl. Like corners, I can move 30 feet. There's a door, I'm going to stand that side of the door, shoot, the score, right? Doors are the biggest time wasters in Dungeons and Dragons. Again, using Dungeons and Dragons as a catch-all for anything that's fantasy roleplay. I missed the shields up front. What's the marching order? If you're at the back, it's like, oh no, I'm not going to get ambushed. I really like that sometimes, just grinding through a dungeon. Now, Dungeon Crawler Carl is that game in novel book form. I've read enough so far to see the skills are relevant to the book, so it's all tongue-in-cheek. But you know what I really like about Dungeon Crawler Carl? Without getting too deep about it, it's... how do I put this? It's perfect, I guess, for anyone, but from let's use a label, from a Gen X perspective, it sort of resonates with me because it's like I don't know how to present this without sounding political, and I'm not, this is not what this is for. It's like a video game machine that is deliberately a construct, a distraction, designed in a very literal way, designed to grind you down, and there can be very few winners of that game. It's like, it's essentially middle-aged, bewildered man dropped into video game, deal with it, survive. And I guess with Dungeon Crawler Carl as well, it's going to be funny. It's got to be funny. It's got to be on the nose. It's got to be super fantastical, but it's got to have obviously one foot firmly in modern day society and obviously sci-fi as well. It covers all bases. So I really am looking forward to this because I feel like we're going to be laughing a lot while playing it. People who don't know Dungeon Crawler Carl are going to have their eyes opened to something that I think, actually my friend Dan got me into it. I'm a proponent of, I'm a product of Lord of the Rings, Dragonlance, Forgotten Realms books, Joe Abercrombie, George R.R. Martin. This is me. And then when my friend Dan, we were rolling around one day trying to break each other's arms in jiu-jitsu, and he's like, "Oh, have you read Dungeon Crawler Carl?" And I was like, "That sounds like a dodgy name for a book. Sounds like a Ray Harryhausen book," which is something not Ray Harryhausen, he's the guy who did the animation. Harry Harrison, I think. Not too taxing, whatever. I kind of dismissed it a bit. Sorry, Dan. And then I got it on Audible and listened to it, and I was like, shit, this is great. So I waded in, and now I'm very excited about Dungeon Crawler Carl. Can't come soon enough as far as I'm concerned, because if you put it next to, this is what I hope, it's a bit like EZD6 in a way. But if you put it next to like the big hitters like Cthulhu, Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Daggerheart, I guess, this should be something that you can sit down and have a good old laugh with. And the players that you have that are more liable to kind of like derail things anyway, they're going to have a great time. And hopefully it won't be, people won't feel so down if that's the case, because the game's just, the books and the game is hopefully just made to be a bit of a riot. I did think about picking up the Terry Gilliam, not that he wrote it, but the Monty Python, the Holy Grail RPG. I've seen some good reviews, but that's almost like a bit too close for me. I might have a look at it one day, but I don't know. Dungeon Crawler Carl is a different thing. It knows what it is, I think. Anyway, that's all there is about that. So I think I'm going to wrap it up, really. Go check out the Dungeon. If I say DCC, you're going to think Dungeon Crawl Classics. Check out the Dungeon Crawler Carl at Backakit. It's past the 8 million mark, which is nuts. I think, did Cosmere get that much? I don't know, but it's gone off the charts. It's fantastic. So all their stretch goals are met, all their stretch targets and stuff. So they're starting to, I think, put things out a little early, little tasters and stuff for us. So get involved if you like the idea of that one. And I will stay relatively close to Dungeon Crawler Carl until it's released, because I'm excited about it, and I don't get. That's my wife. If I don't get excited about stuff, I find it very hard to talk about it. So there we go. Anyway, I think I'm going to finish it there. I'm like over half an hour into this, so I guess, if you because obviously my channel is tiny, I was actually quite surprised at the amount of views I got on the first video I put out. Not loads, but surprised. But because it's so small, if you want to ask me something, just stick it in a comment or whatever. Because, it's something that I can check into every now and again, and I can reply if there's not too many comments. So obviously if it's anything personal, I ain't going to answer it. But if it's anything to do with role-playing games or, stuff that, I don't know, movies or whatever, I will attempt to communicate with you on a human level through technology. Isn't that nice? Anyway, have a lovely one. I still haven't come up with any kind of sign-off. No, that won't work. So, tiddly poop.